struggling with unforgiveness in your life, there is everywhere somebody somewhere that will have offended you or somebody else, and we've all dealt with it. The problem is not so much is just get over it, but what do you do with it? How do you move from there? And there are a lot of people in this world today that tend to hold on how they have been wronged, how they have been hurt, and don't want to let go of that unforgiveness. Why? Because the other person does not deserve it, and you no longer want to be nice to that person because of the way you have been treated, rightfully so or wrongfully so. So what is it that you do, and what is the result when you do not let go? Well, it's like getting a long chain around your neck and putting a bunch of bowling balls right behind that and dragging that with you over and over again. And guess what? The longer you go, the longer you hold on to that pain, the longer you have rights, you think, to not be nice to that other person, the heavier the chain and the bowling balls become. And anger turns into unforgiveness, unforgiveness turns into bitterness, and bitterness eventually will turn into hatred, and you end up reacting and behaving in a way you never even thought you could. And today, I would like to stop that. I have an answer for you that will help you, that you do no longer have to carry all these bowling balls that slow you down in life and help you make choices that should not be right. What is it that you can do to turn it around? And I have a special guest with me today, Heather Murdock, and she knows all about that because she was raised by a wonderful couple, by her parents who were actually hippies, and there was no electricity and no water. Can you even imagine? I love my curling iron. So, but that's what she had, and then her father was an alcoholic and wanted nothing to do with God. It was a tough childhood. It was not easy, and thinking about that, who more than her could have a right to feel and hold on to unforgiveness? Heather, welcome.
Thank you, Barb. Good to be here today with you.
Yeah, now you had a tough childhood. What was it like? Were you trying to hide from it? How was it at school? Tell me a little bit about it.
Yes, it was very hard. No child wants to be different, and I certainly was no exception. I wanted to fit in, and people knew how we lived, and so I was that kid that got made fun of quite a bit in school. I wore a lot of hand-me-downs, and people knew that we lived in a teepee, we lived in a school bus, we lived in a camper, we lived in an RV, we lived in everything but a house. And so people knew that. And so at school, I was the target. And
isn't that funny how they find those, and it's like this whole popular group starts bullying you, basically.
Oh, that's exactly what happened. And as a result of things that were happening at school, and then what was happening at home with the domestic violence, life felt pretty hopeless. Honestly, I felt like, where is God? I mean, I believed in God. I didn't know Jesus, but I believed that there was a God, and I would talk to him quite a bit. And I would just pray that he would stop my parents from fighting. I prayed that he would help us be a normal family. I prayed that he would stop the kids from picking on me, that I could be loved, because I did not feel loved.
Now, how did he answer that? Because how could you believe in God when your father was so against the God, or did that make you more reason to say there is something out there?
I think, well, my grandparents were Christians, and so they would sneak us to church periodically, and so I knew a little bit, but I had not received Jesus as my Savior. And I just believed. I don't know, Barb. I just always believed that there was a God. And at the time, you know, I was actually angry. I grew more angry with God as each year passed because I felt like he was not changing things. And I actually thought that God was very angry with me. I thought, why would God allow me? Why would God allow this suffering in our family? Because it was really hard, Barb. It was really hard. I don't remember, honestly, ever being happy as a kid. And I hate to say that. God's redeemed that now. But at the time, it was really, I felt very hopeless.
Yeah, so normally spoken, when a child goes through that, you have to cope.
Yes.
You have to take some things on to survive, as I probably would call it. What were your coping mechanisms?
Well, that's a great question. I became the people pleaser, the fixer, the perfectionist, the codependent. I believed that if I could only be perfect enough, that maybe my parents could change. I believed that if only I was liked enough, loved enough, pretty enough, oh my gosh, I was, like I said, very awkward as a kid, very homely. And so I believed if I could become pretty, if I was pretty, I'd be loved. And so as I got older into high school, I finally bloomed, and I started getting attention, and that validated. Now all of a sudden I am popular. I was a cheerleader, I was in a pageant in my senior year, I got lots of attention, and that really validated that my looks were what made me accepted. And so I clung onto my looks so hard, I actually became bulimic in high school because I believed that I had to...
yeah, let me go back to that a little bit, because I could see the coping, the bulimia, but I want to get back to one key I think you had. And you said something like you wanted to feel loved, you wanted to feel accepted, and you would do anything for it, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
And often what happens with a little girl, that they want to impress their daddy, that they want to earn love from their daddy.
Yes.
Was that you?
Yes, oh, absolutely. I wanted my father's approval more than anything. And the only reason I've been able to be set free from that is my relationship with Jesus. Because prior to knowing God, I lived for my dad's approval. And I remember I was in a counseling appointment one day, and she said to me, what if your dad never gives you that approval? Are you going to let him continue to have that control over you? And I was like, that was powerful. That was so powerful. And I just had this revelation that I have to let this go. Yeah. And that was the beginning of the process of forgiveness for me.
So that's good. Yeah. Now, at the age of 18,
yes,
you're like, I have had it.
I've had enough.
I'm out of here. I got to protect myself. And I want to address that, because what is it that actually that process, that worked through? Because often when we're really hurt by someone, or even by our own parents, even if they don't mean to, when you're hurt with them, usually often we will first take the escape route before we actually take the route to God.
Exactly.
Why do we always take the detour? You know?
We're so stubborn.
So before we go there though, I want to find out what happened. What was your detour? But before we do that, we will be right back.
Hi, I'm Shanice, and I am the guest coordinator for the Barb Marshall Show. And I actually get to do all the details of talking to people to be on the show, get to hear their stories, and I look forward to possibly hearing from you. We are looking for people that have stories, testimonies like yours. Do you have something to share with me that's of a life changed? I want to hear that story to see if we could possibly get you to be a guest on our show. Do you know someone who has an amazing story of their life being changed, or possibly they're involved in a ministry that changes lives? I'd like to hear about that. I'd like you to share that with me. My name again is Janice. Please contact me at janice@loveyourlifeministries.org, or you can go to our website, Love Your Life Ministries, and you can go to BarbTV and find us there. I look forward to hearing from you.
With me is Heather Murdock, and we're talking about what it is like to go through life with unforgiveness. And is there an option for you too, instead of to take the detour away from God towards God, to get an answer to that? At 18, you basically almost run away.
Yes.
What did you do? Where did you go?
Well, as a child, the way that I would escape the circumstances is I would live a fantasy life in my mind. And that fantasy life was me being a famous actress. And I dreamed about moving off to Hollywood someday and finally getting that validation and affirmation. That was really what I wanted to do. And so I think I was actually 19, I moved to Hollywood. And I really at the time thought I was pursuing my dreams, but in retrospect, I realized that, like you said, I was running away. I was running because I did not know how to deal with my family life. I didn't know how to fix them. I could not fix them. I could not change anything. And I was so burdened, and there was so much pressure that I put on myself too, of trying to be successful, to be perfect, yes,
to no longer in the life that you came out of.
Exactly. I wanted to overcome that. I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to prove that I was worthy, that I wasn't what the kids at school said I was. I wanted to overcome that. I didn't want to be defined by that anymore, and I didn't know any other way, like you said. So I ran off to Hollywood. I have a lot of stories that would take a whole nother show to talk about.
Yeah, go there right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So you get in Hollywood, and I'm envisioning a young or a teenager that 19. Has been held back in life all her life, and here she has full freedom.
Yes.
So then what comes to my mind is sex, alcohol, and drugs.
Absolutely.
Was that you?
Oh yeah, I lived, and and I justified it because I was living with, or I was, invited to all the right parties. So I was going to.
Well, what do you mean by the right parties?
Well, because they were like Hollywood celebrity parties, and so I justified it because growing up I wouldn't have seen myself getting into that lifestyle, but I justified it because it was with celebrities and all that. So yeah, I got into the fast life. I lived by the seat of my pants. I had the motto, "I'll try anything once," which I do not recommend that, but. So the more that I lived like that, the more shame and guilt I had, because I already had shame and guilt from how we lived as a family and the abuse that was happening, and I thought that was my fault. So now living these choices and living, with this mask and dealing with bulimia that I kept hidden, I felt even more like a failure, more shame and more guilt.
And while you're there,
and then I ran harder.
You run away, you run farther, you end up on the East Coast, and then you get a devastating phone call. And that's what I want to talk about today, that devastating phone call. Your sister was killed by a drunken driver. What did that do to you when you found that out? You've run away to escape the life, and now what?
I'll never forget that moment, Barb. It was a moment that absolutely changed my life, and I know many people can relate to this. I was living in New York, as you said. I had gone to a girls' trip to Las Vegas for the weekend, and there was a message blinking on the phone. The message was my ex-boyfriend calling me to say that my parents could not find me, because honestly, Barb, I didn't tell my family how to get a hold of me. They knew I was in New York, but I didn't tell them how to get a hold of me. My sister would call, and I would avoid her calls because I just didn't know how to deal with all that.
So you get the call.
So I get the call.
They get a hold of you. Now what?
Now, my sister's been killed by a drunk driver. I think I literally sunk to the floor. The bottom just fell out of my life. What had happened is my sister was, she went to the Nutcracker Ballet with her boyfriend and her best friend and her best friend's sister. They came home that night, and there was a gentleman coming home from a Christmas party at his employer's house, and he had too much to drink at the party. And he drove into their car, and he
killed her.
Yep, and he was killed, and her best friend was killed. So 3 people died that night.
Wow. And what came to your mind that moment? Because you had not been there to help your sister, to protect your sister, to provide for sister, or to get her out of that environment. That's what would have gone through me. So if this was you, now there's a couple of choices. Are you going to blame God for the whole darn thing, or your parents, or yourself, which is usually how did you deal with it?
I blamed myself, and I was so distorted, and the enemy was working so hard in my life that I actually believed, Barb, that God killed my sister to punish me because I was such a disappointment. I believed that I was truly such a disappointment to God that He killed my sister to get at me. Can you believe that? I mean,
that's pretty distorted, but I could see with the way everything was happening and going, how you would get there. So, and the next thought I would have in my mind, your family you felt was never there for you, but were you going to be there now for your parents?
Of course, and my mom and I have always been close. My mom did the best she could with what she had. So I came home immediately, of course, and even then, even in my grief, I was still afraid of my dad. Even in my grief, and I was so ashamed.
What was the fear?
The fear was that I let my family down, because I carried the responsibility of my family on my shoulders my whole life. So in my twisted sense of reality, I felt like I had let my family down. I felt like a complete failure, and I really felt that I should have died. I felt like my sister was an innocent, beautiful young girl with everything ahead of her, and look at all the things I had done. I literally felt it should have been me. So I came home to be with my family, and I still was not a believer at that point. I was 23 years old. Willow was 19 when she got
let me
killed.
ask you a question. How many bowling balls of unforgiveness are on your chain at this point?
I loved your analogy in the beginning of the show. It was so appropriate. I don't even know how he's put one foot in front of the other. I carried so much of other people's stuff and my own stuff. It was so heavy, it was suffocating. And I had a lot of bowling balls, and I did not know how to cut it. And it was not until, I don't know if you want to go to this point, but I became a believer at 38 years old.
Wow.
So 37 years old, actually. And it wasn't until I became a believer that my life started to change.
Really?
Yes.
So
dramatically.
Yes, I want to go there in just a moment. So, but here you are, you're with your family, your bowling balls grow, and God has been trying for you to become part of His story with your story. Through all the pain, He's been trying to get a hold of you, and you keep saying, I don't think so.
Yes.
And then how do you deal with that unforgiveness? And how would you deal with that unforgiveness? What is it that you could do? When you have a story like hers, how can God allow that in your life? And that is what is next. And you are going to get the answer. Stay tuned. Unforgiveness. It happens to all of us. How do we deal with it? If it's unforgiveness of self or unforgiveness of others, and what is it that you can do to finally be set free from the pain that is in your heart and which takes over into such an ugly form that follows you everywhere you go? Today we're going to give you that answer. You're here, your sister has died, Heather, and there you are, and life is ugly, ugly. But then things start changing and moving, and I would have been angry with people. I would have been angry with the drunken driver. That would have been a bowling ball right there, probably 5 of them. I would have been angry why my sister was on the street that late at night and who gave the keys to what happened with all that. So what about you? How did you deal with that, Heather?
Well, not very well, Barb, at that time. As you said, the noose just tightened more around my neck, and I made a lot of bad choices during that time, got into a lot of bad relationships, trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. And, you know, I became a believer, like I said, at 37 years old. I really believe that the Lord has used my husband. My husband's a Christian, and he was a Christian since he was young.
So he married you while you were not a Christian?
Exactly.
That must have been tough in the beginning.
Well, actually, and my husband was not, I wouldn't say, he's always had a great heart and man of integrity, absolutely, but he wasn't a practicing Christian. It was something that he kind of felt I'll come to on my own. He didn't, you know, pull me along. Then one day, by this time we have 2 kids together, and I'm feeling the urge that I really want my kids to know God.
Isn't that funny?
Yes.
Your dad wants nothing to do with church.
Yes.
You have full of unforgiveness of stuff you haven't worked through or dealt with.
Yes.
And you're going to go to church to please your kids.
Exactly. True. Yes,
I think you were full of baloney at that moment. So
well, and
I was like, really?
Well, I like what you said, though, because I think God was pursuing me the whole time, and I didn't even realize it.
Yes.
And now I see the hand of God through my whole story, you know, of course, in hindsight. So my children, I wanted to give them, you know, that foundation. I want them to have a Christian foundation. So I started.
Why? Was that still to please your dad?
No.
What was the reason for that?
I think it's because I was just seeking so hard. I wanted to find meaning and purpose. And I must have had some sense that I would find God there, but I wasn't really ready to admit that yet. I think I was in denial.
Did you find him?
Absolutely, I did. In fact, when I was seeking, I was at the point of the heaviest, hardest seeking. I didn't know where to find God. I wanted my kids to be in church, but I didn't know, And my husband gave me a Bible. And my husband gave me my first Bible, actually. And he said to me, I hope you find the light that you're looking for in these pages, Heather. And I started reading the Bible, Barb, and I started reading from page 1, and I could not get enough of it. I was so hungry. I was like ravenous over the Word. I didn't even understand half of it. And some of it was hard to believe at the time, but I was so smitten. And I do believe I fell in love with Jesus just between him and I in the pages of the Bible. And then that, of course, intensified my desire then to go to church. And so we started church shopping. Long story short, we've landed in the church that we're in now.
Now, wait a minute, because a lot of people, when people start church shopping and start looking for God, stuff goes wrong. Was that your case?
No, I cannot. Again, we have to have another show because, I mean, I have so many amazing stories, miracles of how God just started.
Did things go wrong? Didn't you lose your job and your husband lost his job as well? Well, didn't things get tough and miserable? And did that actually make you walk away from God or run towards him? And why? Why is that? Wasn't that the same God that blew it before with the accident and with everything else in your mind?
I don't know, Barb. I think that I just had a peace when I would read the Bible. And so when I lost my job, you're right in the beginning of becoming a brand new believer, not even quite there yet, but on the edge of it, that's when we lost our jobs. And I lost my job and I had such peace. I walked out of that place knowing that I was in God's hands. And then something amazing happened in the miracle of forgiveness, if we can talk about that, about the phone call that I got. I was actually at that time involved, after I lost my job, I started a home-based business.
I want to go about that peace for a moment first. Yes. You're talking about the peace. You have the peace. What peace are you talking about?
The peace that passes understanding. The peace that passes human understanding. I cannot explain it myself, except for it was a peace of Jesus. It was knowing that that God had a plan and a purpose for my life. It was. I'll tell you what. The perfectionism, the codependency, the shame, the guilt, all that, I was trying to perform to earn some sort of belonging.
You're allowed to be yourself now?
Yes. So when I started believing in Jesus, it's like he filled the void. Yeah. He filled the void, Barb. He filled the void automatically. And to this day, it's been almost 6 years, I have not had one incident of my bulimia. I have had a 100% deliverance, 100%
Praise
deliverance.
God. That is
it's
amazing.
all Him. It's all
That
Him.
is
I did nothing
amazing.
for that.
And then I want to address that to you too for a moment, because that peace she's talking about, that is a peace that you can have as well. How do you get that peace? Well, it's really simple. You know, get to know God. Start searching for God. Call us, connect with us, 855-836-1100. Or go to BarbTV.org. Because when you're stuck, when you struggle, and when you drag on in life, there is hope for you too, just like there was for Heather. And we're going to have a download for you, which is called the Romans Road, which is going to be on our website, that actually could really help you to find how you too get that peace by getting to know Jesus. And yes, Jesus wants to set you free and give you that peace as well. Now, there was one big problem though. There was some person you had a real frustration with.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Tell me about Doug.
Okay, Doug, yes, absolutely. So the person that gave, remember I told you how the person was leaving his employer's Christmas party, okay?
Yes.
And he had too much to drink there. Doug was his boss, and Doug asked him, can you drive home? And he said, yes, I can. There wasn't really a lot of testing in that, and he just said, okay, here's the car keys, and he proceeded to kill himself and 2 people that night. So since he died, the driver, my anger fixated on Doug.
And Doug was the one that gave the keys to the drunken driver.
Yep, the owner. If he had not had the party, my sister would still be alive. If he had not given the keys, my sister would still be alive. If he had been more diligent in checking the sobriety of the person, he would still be alive. Those are all the things I said in my mind that justified my anger, my lack of forgiveness for all those years.
So it's interesting though, because you used to feel God was angry with you, and now you're angry with Doug.
Yes.
And you hold on to it.
Yep,
Another
absolutely.
bowling ball.
Exactly.
So you hold on to it. So knowing God, He's not going to leave you there.
Exactly.
So what did He do?
So it's a long story, but just to kind of condense it, I had started a home-based business after I lost my job, and I got invited to a business meeting. And I was not even supposed to be at that business meeting. I had other plans that day.
What happened at the meeting?
At the meeting, I'm talking to this couple, and it turns out that they worked in the same company as the driver of the car.
How did you know that? Did you know his name?
Well, no, I knew the name of the company, and so when I was asking them what they had done for a living, they said, oh, we used to work for this company up in this area, and there was only one company with that name. And I had not thought of that in 15 years. I mean, other than thinking about Doug and all that.
So go on.
Yes, so so when I found out that they had been at that, or that they were not at that party, but they had worked for that same company, I asked them if they knew the driver. I asked them if they knew about the incident, and they said, yes, we do. How do you know about it? And I said, that was my sister. And you could hear a pin drop. I mean, this is not even in the same town. This is 15 years later.
So did you get a hold of Doug?
Yes. So I asked them.
How did that go? Or when you see him the first time?
No, we didn't see each other. We talked on the phone. I asked them, I said, can I have his phone number? And she said, why? And I said, because I want to forgive him. And as soon as those words flew out of my mouth, it was like, I don't want to call him. No, I was fearful. I was like, who just said that?
Did you call him?
I did call him. I called him a week later through much prayer. I prayed through, and I called him, and it was about a 30-minute phone call. And it was a phone call that absolutely changed my life, and I like to think it had a big impact on Doug's life as well, because I told him, Doug, I completely forgive you. I said, I have been harboring anger and resentment at you for so long, and I let it go, and I forgive you. And I said, who knows if I wouldn't have made the same judgment call? How do I know? Yeah. He made a mistake. And
How did Doug feel when you let
go? He was speechless. He was speechless. Yeah. He actually went through a range of emotions. He went through silence, and then he went through defensiveness and anger and explaining himself, and then he went through shock that I could call him. He said, Heather, how did you have the power to call me? I can't imagine how you could call me. And I said, Jesus.
That's true, God. Yeah.
I said, Jesus gave me the power to call you. I said, I'm a believer now, and I love Jesus, and He has asked me to call and forgive you.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
What started so rotten in your childhood with no electricity, no,
yes.
an alcoholic father trying to improve, you were able to completely let go. And that's what God did in your life.
Exactly. And can I say, Barb, that after, when I hung up the phone with him, I sat there in the backyard, and I just cried, and I looked up, and I just said, I finally let you go, meaning my sister. I finally let that go. And I was able at that moment to forgive my father, and I was able to forgive anyone who'd ever hurt me, and you know what? I was able to forgive myself. That was the hardest one. And I was able to fully forgive God.
Wow.
It was powerful. It changed my life. I'm telling you, it changed my life.
You accomplished you accomplished just, you know, so much. And you answered the question of the show today, is it possible to forgive against all odds?
Yes.
And Heather, thank you for allowing God to touch you in such a way that you can live in peace now and share with other people by forgiving them what God has forgiven you from as well.
Amen.
So,
exactly. Thank you.
I want to give you my book, Ransomed.
Oh,
thank you for joining us at the show.
Thank you. I love it.
And thank you for being honest and vulnerable, because I believe this show is about the real deal and how people can change because of God's love for them.
Amen.
Thanks for coming.
Amen. Thank you.
And then, does it say anything in the Bible if you should forgive or not, or should hold it against other people the rest of your life like they deserve? Well, why don't I let the Bible speak for itself for that? And it says in Matthew, right after the prayer, it's after the Lord's Prayer. It says, you know, let your kingdom come, you're the glory, all of that stuff. But it does not stop there, because after that it says this: for if you forgive others for their transgressions, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But, there is a but behind there. But if you do not forgive others, then your Father will not forgive your transgressions. And you say, wait a minute, Barb. What about rape? What about molesting? What about murder? What about the ugly, ugly stuff that is done with full intention? What about that? They don't deserve to be let off the hook. You're right. They're not. They really don't deserve it. But if you don't let them off the hook, you'll be struggling the rest of your life, and you'll be attached to that offense that has been placed upon your heart by holding on to it. So I have 4 solutions for you in how you can deal with that. And number 1 is, you have to admit your pain. You have to admit your struggle. You have to admit that you're having a hard time and tell God how you feel. Number 2, find everything about that situation, what has happened. Not to do this to the offender, but to get full detail what has happened in the full picture with all people involved. Number 3, do not let your hurt become an excuse for whatever you want to do or are going to do. And number 4, and this is easier said than done, surrender your pain to God. Forgive the person, start to pray for them as much as they don't deserve it, and allow God with the results. And as I've experienced in different ways, in some incredible ways, as what Heather has experienced as well, I can guarantee you, when you let go of the pain, God will heal your heart and help you to start to thrive again. Call us, 855-836-1100. Or go to BarbTV.org. Don't stay stuck, but start living fully, and Jesus will help you with that. I love you, and God loves you even more. Have a great day.